everyone. Today we're going to continue with Chapter 10, Section 3, which is Other Functions and Disorders of the Excretory System. Before I start Section 3, I'm going to cover everything that we've done in this chapter so far. So far, we covered how the human excretory system is responsible for removing liquid waste from the body, and it also regulates the acid-base balance and the water-salt balance of the blood and secretes some hormones. The kidneys are the primary excretory organs, and they are organized into three regions: the renal cortex, the renal medulla, and the renal pelvis. The kidneys are composed of millions of functional units called nephrons that filter the waste from the blood and produce urine. And also, as we covered, urine leaves the kidney through tubes called ureters, and it passes through the bladder and exits the body through urethra. We also covered that in the glomerulus, filtration moves water solutes except for proteins from the blood plasma into the nephron, and how solutes are actively transported from the filtrate into the proximal tubule back into the blood. Also, approximately 65% of the filtrate that passes through the entire length of the proximal tubule is reabsorbed and returned to the body, while the urine becomes concentrated. We also learned that filtrate moves through the nephron, and the processes of glomerular filtration, tubular reabsorption, tubular secretion, and water reabsorption modify the filtrate so the cleansed plasma and substances such as glucose, amino acids, and sodium return to the blood. So as I said in Section 3, we're going to focus about other functions and disorders of the excretory system. Remember how we learned in Section 1 that the kidneys don't only filter waste from the blood, but also carry out several other important homeostatic functions, including maintaining the water-salt balance of the blood, regulating blood pH, and secreting some hormones. The kidney also plays an important role in maintaining blood pressure and can be damaged if blood pressure is too high. The kidneys keep the water-salt balance of the blood within normal limits, so they can maintain the blood volume and the blood pressure. Most of the water and salt present in the filtrate is reabsorbed across the wall of the proximal tubule. The force generated as water moves by osmosis is called osmotic pressure. Osmotic pressure affects many cellular activities, especially the exchange of materials between the cells and the blood. Osmotic receptors are the cells that are sensitive to osmotic pressure. Most receptors are located in the hypothalamus. Remember in Chapter 8 that the hypothalamus regulates mechanisms that enable the body to maintain homeostasis, such as hunger, thirst, blood pressure, body temperature, fluid balance, and salt balance. When the blood plasma becomes too concentrated, for example, dehydration, osmotic pressure increases, which results in osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus sending impulses to the pituitary gland in the brain that causes the release of ADH hormone. Antidiuretic hormone is a hormone regulated by the hypothalamus and released by the pituitary gland that increases the permeability of the distal tubule and the collecting duct in the nephrons of the kidneys. It allows more water to be reabsorbed into the blood from the filtrate, which results in diluting the blood and lowering the osmotic pressure to normal. In another case, if the blood plasma is too dilute, meaning the osmotic pressure is too low, the osmotic receptors in the hypothalamus stop or prevent the release of ADH. As a result, the distal tubule and the collecting duct become less permeable to water, which allows more water to be excreted in the urine and concentrating the solutes in the blood. The osmotic pressure of the plasma and tissue fluids rise to normal. Diabetes insipidus is a condition where ADH activity is insufficient, and a person urinates excessively. In this condition, the thirst is intense, but water is secreted more quickly than it is consumed, which leads to severe dehydration and ion imbalances. The people who have this condition can take synthetic ADH to restore the water balances. Ethanol and alcoholic beverages and caffeine are diuretic, so they increase the volume of urine. They stimulate urine production partly by inhibiting the release of ADH, which decreases the permeability of the tubule and collecting ducts. Alcohol and caffeine increase water loss to urine, which intensifies thirst and leads to dehydration. In this diagram, it shows on the right side if the blood fluids are too concentrated, means osmotic pressure is too high. Osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus sense increased osmotic pressure and send signals to the pituitary gland to release ADH into the bloodstream. Then increased reabsorption of water in kidney tubules and collecting ducts happen, which increase water in the urine, which is when osmotic pressure of the body fluid decreases. On the left side, it shows if body fluids are too dilute, which means osmotic pressure is too low. Osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus send signal to decrease release of ADH, which decrease the reabsorption of water in kidney tubules and collecting ducts, and that increase water in the urine, which results in increasing osmotic pressure. Reabsorption of salts. The kidneys regulate salt balance in the blood by controlling the excretion and reabsorption of various ions. For example, the sodium ion is the most abundant ion in the blood plasma. Hormones regulate the reabsorption of sodium at the distal tubule. Remember in Chapter 9 that aldosterone is a hormone secreted by adrenal cortex, and it stimulates the excretion of potassium ions and the reabsorption of sodium ions. The release of aldosterone is set in motion by the kidneys themselves. When the blood volume and the pressure is too low to promote glomerular filtration, the kidneys secrete renin. The presence of renin starts a reaction that eventually triggers the release of aldosterone from the adrenal cortex. Aldosterone stimulates the distal tubules and collecting ducts to reabsorb sodium. Because the reabsorption of sodium is followed passively by chloride ions and water, aldosterone has the net effect of retaining both salt and water, and that's when the blood volume and blood pressure increases. The kidneys help maintain the pressure of body fluids at the normal, which is about 7.4. And if homeostasis is not maintained and the blood pH goes above or below 7.4, serious medical condition can result. The foods and the liquids we consume can result in changes to the blood pressure. Not only the food we consume, but also cellular respiration can alter blood pH. However, due to 3 homeostatic mechanisms, blood pH remains at about 7.4. The 3 mechanisms are acid-base buffer system, respiration, and the function of the kidneys. The acid-base buffer system prevents changes in the pH by taking excess hydrogen ion or excess hydroxide ions that enter the blood. And this reaction involves carbonic acid and bicarbonate ions. And you can see here the reactions that happen when hydrogen ion or hydroxide ions are added to the blood. These reactions temporarily prevent any significant change in the blood pH. However, they're not a permanent solution because a blood buffer can be overwhelmed unless a permanent adjustment is made, which occurs in the lungs. For the respiratory center hydrogen ion concentration, the blood rises, the respiratory center in the medulla increases the breathing rate. Increasing the breathing rate rids the body of hydrogen ions because the following reaction takes place in the capillaries within the blood. An increased breathing rate pulls the reaction to the right to generate CO2 more quickly. When carbon dioxide is exhaled, the number of hydrogen ions is reduced. It's important to have correct proportion of carbonic acid and bicarbonate ions in the blood. Breathing readjusts this portion so that this particular acid-base buffer system can continue to absorb both hydrogen ion and hydroxide ion as needed. The acid-base buffer system and the respiration are aided by the more powerful actions of the kidneys to control the acid-base balance in the blood. Only the kidneys can rid the blood of a wide range of acidic and basic substances, which adjusts the pH. Kidneys are slower acting than the other 2 mechanisms, however, they are more powerful with controlling the pH. If the blood is too acidic, hydrogen ions are excreted and bicarbonate ions are reabsorbed. If the blood is too basic, hydrogen is not excreted and bicarbonate ions are not reabsorbed. Ammonia provides another means of buffering and removing the hydrogen ions in the urine. Ammonia is produced in the tubule cells by the breakdown of amino acids. The ability of kidneys to control blood pH is crucial to maintaining the internal environment in which cell enzymes continue to function properly. As you can see in this picture here, in the kidneys, bicarbonate ions are reabsorbed and hydrogen ions are excreted as needed to maintain the pH of the blood. Excess hydrogen ions are buffered, for example, by ammonia, which is produced in the tubule by the breakdown of amino acids. Releasing hormones. We already know that the kidneys release renin, which is a substance that leads to the secretion of hormone aldosterone. Kidneys also release two of their own hormones, erythropoietin and calcitriol. If the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood is reduced or oxygen demand increases, sensors in the kidneys stimulate kidney cells to release erythropoietin, which produces red blood cells in bone marrow. As the number of red blood cells circulating in the blood increases, the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood increases. When the oxygen